Yeah, Joel, I have sent the recording on the WhatsApp group of Greenhouse just now, a few minutes back. So if you can just confirm for me once that it is accessible to you. The recording and the notes I have sent of the last lecture on 23rd March. Okay. So yes, we were discussing the concept of calorimetry. So the word calorimetry actually comes from an apparatus called calorimeter. So let's start by understanding that today. So a calorimeter is a simple apparatus to measure heat exchange. For experiments related to heat exchange between two materials, resulting in temperature change and or state change. Okay. So as we were discussing last time, these are the two things that can happen. These are the two processes that can happen as a result of heat exchange. Either the material's temperature will change or it will undergo a state change. Okay. So now a calorimeter is basically just, it is like a vacuumized double walled flask, which acts then like an insulated environment or insulated container. So a calorimeter basically just consists of a heat insulated vessel in which we can keep different materials. Okay. And between them there will be heat exchange. And there is some mechanism by which we can measure the temperature. Okay. So can monitor the temperature inside the calorimeter while the heat exchange is happening. Yeah, very good, Josh. You have used a calorimeter, so you are aware of what it looks. So basically, it looks like a vacuum flask kind of material, right? And there is a slot from which you can insert a thermometer so that you can monitor the temperature inside. Something like that, Josh. Okay. Yeah, wooden box or sometimes it can be in the form of wooden box, or it can be like a box which is wooden inside and it's got a metallic shell outside, but also in between there is a slot in which you can keep some thermocol kind of material, or even some glass wool kind of material, which is a good insulator of heat. Sponge type, yes, that's correct. Okay. And there will always be a slot through which you can keep a thermometer half inside half outside, so that you are able to measure the temperature inside. Just a second, guys. Yeah, just a second, guys. I'll just continue. Just give me a minute. Huh? Okay, sorry about the breaks, Moons. Let's continue it. So yeah, as we were discussing, a calorimeter is that simple kind of apparatus where we have a heat insulated chamber. Now, heat insulated means there is no exchange of heat between whatever is inside the calorimeter or inside the vessel and the outside environment. Okay, and we have some way of monitoring the temperature, as all of you have seen, most of you see. Okay, you can also see photos and videos of calorimeters on YouTube and all that, so you'll understand. So the term calorimeter comes from calorie, and calorie is basically the name of a scientist, but it has become the standard unit of heat, not the SI unit, but it has become a sort of commonly used unit of heat is calorie, and that also we'll see why, because one calorie has a special significance. So anyway, so the term calorimetry comes from calorimeter, which is this apparatus used for doing any experiment based on heat exchange. And as we were discussing last time, that heat supplied or heat absorbed from a material can result in one or two things. Either the temperature of that material starts to change, or it might undergo state change. Okay. So now coming back to heat versus temperature, as we were discussing last time. So the graph of the temperature of any material or any substance with respect to the heat supplied, we saw that this graph is linear initially. Okay, in the solid state, then it reaches a certain temperature at which the graph becomes flat for some time, because the temperature doesn't change while we are supplying heat, because during that time what is happening, the solid is melting. So while the melting process is occurring, there's going to be no change in temperature. So if this was the solid state, then this is the temperature at which we reach that situation where heat supplied results in state change, it results in melting. Until the melting process is completed 100%, there is going to be no temperature change. It's going to remain at melting point. And then once the melting is over, that is all the solid is converted to liquid, then again there will be this thing. There will be temperature change with heat supplied. Then again it will reach a certain temperature at which the next state change will happen. And once vapor is completely formed, again it will be a linear graph. So this is in liquid state. This is when boiling is occurring, and this is in vapor state. So this is the boiling point. So what we discussed about the relationship between temperature change and heat supplied last time was for any solid at a temperature less than boiling point, okay, or any liquid at a temperature which is greater than sorry, this is melting point, not boiling point. Yeah. So temperature less than melting point, or a liquid at a temperature in between melting point and boiling point, okay, or any gas at a temperature greater than boiling point. Okay, temperature varies with heat exchange. Okay, where we can say that Q is equal to C delta T. Okay, so we can see Q is positive. Q means heat supplied to the material. Negative Q means heat absorbed from it. Okay. Delta T is the temperature change. Okay. And here I have expressed it slightly differently than we did in the last lecture. So I have introduced one more term in between called the heat capacity. So heat capacity, okay, it is a property of the body. It is a thermal property of the given body. Okay. So that heat capacity is Q upon delta T. So it is heat per unit temperature change. Okay. So C is defined in joules per degree C, or a common unit will be calories per degree C. Okay. Now further, we will see that if the body is made of what is called an isotropic material, that is, it is not a mixture of different materials. If the given body is homogeneous, that is an isotropic material. Okay. Example, a solid block of metal, okay, with no impurity mixed, or a chunk of ice, okay, or an amount of water, but again no impurities mixed. Okay. Then its heat capacity becomes mass into a material property called specific heat capacity, which means Q becomes M into S into delta T. So here M is the mass of the body in concern, and S is what we call the specific heat capacity. Now the difference between heat capacity and specific heat capacity is a material property. It is independent of the shape, size, mass, etc. of the given body. So, for example, if we are comparing the specific heat capacity of two copper blocks, which are made of, pure copper of the same grade, they might be having different shapes, they might be having different masses, but the specific heat capacity of each of the blocks would be the same because they're both made of the same grade of copper. But the individual heat capacities will vary because that becomes mass into specific heat capacity. So the heavier copper block will have more heat capacity, the lighter one will have less heat capacity. Okay. Whereas, for example, if we are talking about a metallic block which is made of a mixture of metals and has some amount of impurity, then we cannot write the heat capacity directly as mass into specific heat capacity because the different materials present in it, because it's a mixture of some pure material with some impurities, etc. So they will all have, so those impurities will have different values of specific heat capacity. So then we cannot express the heat capacity as M into S. It will become summation M into S for the different materials which are present at different masses and having different specific heat capacities. So anyway, so with that we understand that specific heat capacity is what we call a material property. It is a property of the material with which the given homogeneous or isotropic body is made of. Yeah, I scroll up, Krish. So specific heat capacity, as we saw last time, it is measured in, so S is Q upon M delta T. So it is heat per unit mass per degree change in temperature. Okay. So specific heat capacity is measured in SI unit, it is joules per kilogram Kelvin, but a common unit for it is calories per gram degree C. So that is the difference between specific heat capacity and heat capacity. Okay. So just I'll give you a minute to go through this whole section once, understand the terms, and once we start looking at applications with some numerical questions, it will become more intuitive for you. Yeah, Harshal, you want to see the section above this? Okay. That was just the description of the calorimeter. Right. So people, okay, now coming back to the the graph between heat exchange and this thing, no? And temperature. So now see, the moment I'm talking about this thing, the solid being at a temperature less than melting point, I'm talking about this region of the graph. I'm not talking about the melting point. Okay. Then the moment I'm talking about the liquid being between melting point and boiling point, I'm talking about this region of the graph. So you can see that change in temperature and heat supplied are proportional to each other. So you can see immediately in this region of the graph, Q is proportional to delta T. The amount of, we can call this delta Q also, but I'm just giving it the simple Q. So that's why it's a linear graph, because it's a linear graph. Okay, and you can see C is just the slope of that graph. It is Q upon delta T, so it is heat exchange per unit change in temperature. Similarly, if we are talking about the if we are talking about the gas at a temperature greater than the boiling point, then we are talking about this region of the graph. Now, exactly what is happening at boiling point, what is happening at melting point, we'll come back to that. Okay, but first, this is the description of the three states of matter when they are in this kind of temperature range. What is their behavior of temperature with respect to heat exchange? Yeah, Chris, that is correct. This is what is called a linear graph. Linear graph का मतलब क्या होता है? Straight line. Okay. Any graph where we are plotting a function y as a function of x, such that it could be a straight line like this, or it could be a straight line like this, or it could be a straight line even horizontal. Such are called linear relationships. These are linear graphs or straight lines. Okay. M is, as you know, called the slope. So M is the same thing as delta y by delta x, which is the same thing as the instantaneous rate of change. So because this is a linear graph, a delta Q by delta T is the same thing as dQ by dt. It's the same thing as the heat capacity. Yeah, so that's why I'm saying it is a broken graph. Na? So we are talking about certain regions of the graph. Na? We are talking about that situation where the temperature of the solid is less than melting point, or the temperature of the liquid is between melting and boiling. So in that particular part of the domain, or that part of temperature range, it is a particular straight line. The whole graph itself is a combination of straight lines, as you can see. You understood the point, Krish? So if I'm specifically saying that for these three conditions which are written on the left hand side, what kind of relationship temperature has with temperature change has with heat exchange? It is a linear relationship. Yeah, it hasn't started from the origin because, I mean, obviously, I'm assuming that we are expressing the temperature in absolute scale in Kelvin. So 0 Kelvin won't exist now. So before we started the experiment, before we started supplying heat, it was at some non-zero temperature. Whereas, for example, we can have a situation where the temperature is measured in degrees C and you start the graph from 0 degrees C. And let's say it's some metal, so its melting point is quite a bit higher. So, but yes, in general, we will not start the graph from the origin here, because in general, we'll assume that the temperature may be non-zero. Okay, so the main thing I want you people to focus on right now is the difference between the quantity heat capacity and the quantity of specific heat capacity, right? Heat capacity is a property of a body. So it depends on two things, the material with which the body is made and the mass of the body, both the things. So for example, if I take a copper block and break it into half by mass, I break it into half, then its heat capacity will also become half. But specific heat capacity is the property of the material. It's independent of the shape, size, and mass and all that of the given body. So whether I have half the block or the full block, the material which it is made of, that is the important thing as far as specific heat capacity is concerned. Okay. Okay, is this done now, people? Okay. All right. Now that we've understood the math part of it, okay, let's try to visualize physically what exactly is happening at a molecular level when we are supplying heat to a material and its temperature is increasing. So imagine we have a solid at a certain temperature, like for example, we have that copper block at room temperature. So remember we had discussed that temperature is a measure of the average molecular kinetic energy. So even on a solid material, what is happening? The molecules have a certain vibrational kinetic energy, and that average vibrational kinetic energy of those molecules only is directly proportional to the absolute temperature. So when we touch a material which is at higher temperature than room temperature, we tend to experience a thermal shock, because the molecules of that material, they are vibrating faster than the molecules at the surface of our skin, because that is at room temperature. So there's immediately heat exchange and we experience a thermal shock where we feel the material is hotter. And of course, yes, expansion also takes place, that's right. Okay. But when we supply heat to the material, what happens? So suppose we are talking about our copper block. Now heat is basically what? It is energy. It is nothing but kinetic energy of the molecule. So supplying heat from one body to another means that it's the kinetic energy of its molecules is increasing. And that's why its temperature is increasing. So the more the amount of heat we are supplying, the more will be the increase in kinetic energy of its molecules. And therefore, the proportionately what's happening, its temperature is going to increase. So if you supplied 1 joule of heat, so the average kinetic energy of the molecules has increased by a certain amount. Now, instead if we supply 5 joules of heat, the average kinetic energy would have increased by 5 times. So the temperature would have increased by 5 times. So that is why our delta Q is proportional to delta T. But as we go on supplying more and more heat, now the molecules are vibrating faster and faster. And they reach a certain stage where what happens, the vibrational kinetic energy of the molecules becomes so much that there is going to be some state change that is imminent. That means the molecules have reached some kind of threshold of vibrational kinetic energy and give them a little bit more energy. And what will happen? They will break free of the intermolecular kind of bond that makes them a solid material. And from that state, they will break free and they will become, they will have a different kind of arrangement and they will go into the liquid state. Okay, so the temperature at which this happens, that the vibrational kinetic energy of the molecules has reached a threshold that if we supply even a bit of energy more, then instead of vibrating faster, there's going to be rearrangement of intermolecular bonds. So they're going to break free and they're going to go from one state to the next state where they are more loosely packed, that is from solid to liquid. So at that threshold temperature, the material is ready for a state change. So any extra energy that we supply in the form of heat now, it does not show up in form of kinetic energy. It shows up in the form of the energy required to rearrange the bonds or bond breaking energy. So that is why when we reach the melting point, now what happens? The temperature does not change. Instead, there is a rearrangement of intermolecular bonds and the energy supplied delta Q is going into that bond release energy or into releasing those bonds. So the state is changing while the temperature is remaining constant. But once that process of rearrangement is complete, now we've got liquid molecules which have different kind of intermolecular bond, lot weaker compared to the solid. So these liquid molecules are moving about. They are not just vibrating, but they are actually translating, rotating, that kind of motion. They're having that rigid body kind of motion, moving around the entire volume of the liquid. And further heat supplied will just increase their kinetic energy. So again, temperature starts to rise. Okay. Yeah, I'll explain for what happens for vapor also. Now we are coming to that stage next. So now suppose we have melted the material completely and we have got liquid. Now we are further supplying more heat. So the liquid molecules are moving faster now. So the liquid's temperature is increasing. Okay. And again, as we supply more and more heat, proportionately the average kinetic energy, but this time which type of kinetic energy? It is kinetic energy of translation and rotation instead of kinetic energy of vibration, because within the volume of the liquid, the molecules are free to move about. So translational and rotational kinetic energy of the molecules is increasing proportionately to the amount of heat we are supplying. And that's why at the macroscopic level, what we are observing, the temperature is again rising proportionately. But again, that motion of the molecules, the molecular activity reaches a threshold where supply more heat and they will completely break free of intermolecular bonds. And they will become completely free molecules which move about in random motion like they do in an ideal gas and therefore occupy the entire volume of the container. The gas does not have a fixed amount of volume because the molecules of gaseous state are completely free of any kind of intermolecular attractive force, right? So boiling point is that temperature at which the liquid molecules have reached that threshold that supply any more energy in the form of heat and they will break free completely of each other. Instead of moving faster, it will go into completely breaking the intermolecular bonds or releasing that intermolecular bond energy. So that is why at boiling point, again, the temperature remains constant while we are supplying the heat required to break the molecules free of intermolecular bonds. And once they come to that gaseous state, again, the temperature is proportional to the amount of heat supplied. Okay. But in gases, it's a little bit more complex. Like while we are supplying the heat, we might be keeping the pressure of the gas constant, so it will have a certain kind of slope. We might instead be keeping the volume of the gas constant in the container, so it will have a different slope. So as you have seen in chemistry, I guess in thermodynamics, you know that there are different types of molar specific heat capacity. Isoporic molar specific heat capacity, isobaric molar specific heat capacity, or polytropic molar specific heat capacity, depending on how we are basically supplying the heat, under what kind of circumstances we are supplying, we are doing the heat exchange. So we will come to that in first law of thermodynamics ourselves later also. Okay. But basically, to understand what is happening during state change and why there is no temperature change during state change, one has to understand that when you reach that temperature at which you are either at the melting point for a solid or at a boiling point for the liquid, you have reached that threshold state of energy that supply more energy, and instead of the molecular kinetic energy increasing, there will be rearrangement of intermolecular bonds. So in the case of liquid to gas, there is complete breakage of the intermolecular attractive forces or the intermolecular bonds. So basically the energy we are supplying goes into releasing the bond energy, and that's why the temperature doesn't change. Okay. So coming to that part next, we will see that that type of heat is called latent heat. You might have heard the term latent heat of fusion, latent heat of vaporization earlier also. So that is to do with this kind of state change that is happening now. Yeah, and by threshold I mean the kinetic energy in the case of solids which have reached the which has reached the melting point. The vibrational kinetic energy of the solid molecules, it's reached a threshold value. That means it's reached a limiting value that they can't vibrate faster. Instead, if you give them energy, they'll break free. So that is the meaning of the threshold. Or in the case of liquid molecules, the translational and rotational kinetic energy with which they are moving about, but moving about in such a way that the density of the liquid remains constant, right? More or less, because uh, there is intermolecular bond which is keeping the volume of liquid constant. Only the shape changes according to the shape of the container. So it's reached that threshold energy that if we supply more energy, the molecules won't move faster. Instead, they'll completely break free of each other. Okay, and they'll go into gaseous state. So that is what we mean by the term threshold overlap. So now for a solid material, and here we'll assume that it is a homogeneous or isotropic material. At temperature equal to the melting point, okay, heat supplied results in its state change to liquid, okay, which is what we call melting, while temperature remains constant. At that value of melting point. Okay. So now the mathematical relationship here is Q is equal to M into L, where L is called latent heat of fusion over here. M is the mass of solid melted. So when we supply heat at the temperature equal to melting point, then correspondingly the mass of solid melted is directly proportional to the heat. So this is called the latent heat of fusion. Fusion is the process which is the opposite of melting. So it is called latent heat of fusion. It is measured in joules per kilogram or calories per gram. So if you invert this relation, you can see that latent heat of fusion is Q upon M. So it is the heat required for unit mass to melt or unit mass to undergo state change. So this is the heat needed for unit mass of solid to melt. Okay. So for example, latent heat of fusion of ice, we know from experiment, is about 80 calories per gram. So therefore, for ice at 0 degrees C, okay, 80 calories heat will melt 1 gram ice. Okay. So therefore, to melt, let's say X grams, the heat needed will be X into 80 calories. As simple as this. This is just unitary method. The entire calculation part in this chapter of calorimetry is basically unitary method because it is heat per unit mass per unit temperature change in the case of specific heat capacity, or it is heat per unit mass change in the case of latent heat. So it's just like a unitary method calculation that for 1 gram we need to supply so much heat. So for X number of grams we need to supply how much heat, like that. Okay, so you don't need to memorize this value of latent heat for ice, but we are going to use it in number of problems. So anyway, you will most probably just remember it from practice. Okay, so this is the definition of latent heat of fusion. Latent heat of fusion is the amount of heat needed for a unit mass of a solid to melt. And obviously, this is also material property. So every material has a specific value of latent heat of fusion. For example, ice has this. So every material has two important aspects here. One is it has a specific value of melting point, and the other is it has a specific value of the latent heat of fusion. So you can also additionally note down the definition of melting point. It is the temperature at which heat supplied to a solid material will result in its state change to liquid. Yes, I'm not changing anything. Okay, I'm just adding one part on top. So melting point is the temperature at which a given material, solid, starts to melt on supplying heat. Okay. So this is the melting point is also a material property. It varies from material to material as you know. For ice, for example, it is 0 degrees C or 273 Kelvin. Okay, so let's look at all this with a numerical example. So let's say it's given to us that specific heat capacity of ice is 0.6 calories per gram degree C. Okay? And latent heat of ice is 80 calories per gram, and specific heat capacity of water is 1 calorie per gram degree C. Okay. Now notice the same substance, but in two different states, will have different specific heat capacity. So H2O in solid state, that is ice, has a lower specific heat capacity compared to H2O in liquid form above 0 degrees C at um, at a temperature. So that happens because again, when we are talking about supplying heat to H2O in liquid state, we are talking about the translational and rotational type of kinetic energies of the liquid molecules. Whereas, the intermolecular bonds are much weaker compared to the same material in solid state in ice. So that's why. No, the given values are actually real. Okay, they're from experiment and they're pretty standard values. You can see in any reference manual you will find these values. Okay. But yes, in JEE or in your exams, the values of specific heat capacity and latent heat will be given because they are not something that we can theoretically determine. They are always determined from experimental data collection. Right? So they are determined from what we call empirical experimental data. And we also know that melting point of ice is equal to 0 degrees. So now what we have is an ice block of mass 50 grams initially at minus 2 degrees C is to be heated to a final temperature of 25 degrees C. So calculate the heat supplied to do so. So to bring up the temperature of that material, which is ice, initially existing at minus 2 degrees C and existing in the solid state, up to whatever its final state should be at a temperature of 25 degrees C, how much heat we need to supply. This is what we need to calculate over here. Okay. So just try out this question people. Okay, let's verify the value. So we can say that it's a three-stage process, right? Sorry people for the disturbance in the class. Some parents had come to meet me again. So anyway, so we'll divide, we'll treat this as a three-step process, Q1 plus Q2 plus Q3. So this is the heat needed for ice to be heated from -2 degrees C to 0 degrees C, which is the melting point, right? Then the second stage is melting, okay, and then the third stage is water heated from 0 degrees C to 25 degrees C, the final temperature, right? हाँ इसीलिए mistake किया ना तेज. Okay, so this is mass of ice into specific heat capacity of ice into temperature change for ice plus all of the mass of ice is melting, okay, plus the mass of water formed now into specific heat capacity of water into the temperature change for water. So that's it. Now we have to just substitute. So we have taken how much mass now? 50 grams. So we can use CGS units only. 50 into zero point 0.6 into 2 degrees C temperature change. So this will be in calories now. Okay. Plus 50 grams into 80 calories per gram. So this is also in calories. Plus again 50 grams of water formed into 1 calorie per gram degree C into 25 degrees C. So kitna ho gaya? This is 30 into 2. So that is 60 plus 4000 plus 1250. Okay. So that's how much now? 40 plus 12.5 plus zero point 0.6. So just check my answer if this is correct. Yes, yes, that's correct. Okay. And in case you want to convert this to joules, you can just multiply with 4.18 to be exact to get this in joules. Okay, so with this you would have got an idea about how to do calculations where there is both temperature involved, temperature change involved and state change involved. Yes, Tej, that's correct. Okay, so it's like some 22.19 kilojoules. Okay. Now, once we're done this, let's look at uh, the application of. Before that, let's also discuss about the process of boiling. Okay, and the definition of latent heat of vaporization. Okay, so that definition is very simple. It is just like latent heat of fusion. So, for a liquid at a temperature equal to the boiling point. Okay. So that is the temperature at which heat supplied results in state change, okay, or boiling from liquid to vapor. So for example, boiling point for water is 100 degrees. Okay. So for a liquid at this temperature, heat supplied results in state change, which is like this. So Q is heat supplied to vaporize m mass of liquid. So this proportionality LV is called the latent heat of vaporization. And that is equal to heat per unit mass. Heat per unit mass boiled or vaporized. Latent heat of vaporization of steam, which is water's vaporized form, is about 540 calories per gram. So you can see there's a lot of contrast. Latent heat of fusion for ice is only 80 calories per gram. And this is quite a bit more than that. It's almost 7 times. Because when we are going from liquid to gaseous state, there is complete, uh, there's complete releasing of the bond energy. Because in gaseous state, there is no intermolecular bond at all. Whereas in going from solid to liquid, there's only weakening of the intermolecular bonds that's happening. Okay. So that is why for any material, any substance, the latent heat of vaporization will always be quite a bit more than the latent heat of fusion. Okay, so now that we have understood all the definitions involved, specific heat capacity, latent heat of fusion, and latent heat of vaporization, now we can start applying these concepts in problems involving calorimetry experiments. So calorimetric experiment is a typical heat exchange experiment where what is happening is two materials, two or more materials at different temperatures. Okay, okay, Didi, I'll go back up once, finish writing this down. But yeah, done, beta. Okay. Okay, so let's come back to the application of this in calorimetric experiments. So any calorimetric experiment is one where we a mixture of materials, two or more materials that is, at different temperatures. Okay, and we place them inside a thermally insulated vessel, which is basically our calorimeter. So two or more materials at different temperatures are placed in a thermally insulated vessel, or we can say they are placed inside a thermally insulated vessel. Okay. As a result, they exchange heat until thermodynamic equilibrium is established. So at thermodynamic equilibrium, what happens? There is a uniform, steady temperature. Okay, for the mixture of materials. So now in this process, the calculation that we do is called the principle of calorimetry. And that is that the heat supplied is equal to the heat absorbed. So heat is supplied by the material or materials, as may be the case, that are cooling down. That is, they are losing heat to reach the equilibrium state, and the heat absorbed is by the material or materials that are heating up to reach equilibrium state. Uniform steady. Steady means constant with respect to time. It does not change anymore. So when you put the materials together, initially their temperatures are different. So the temperatures start to change with time. So there is some amount of time for which if you put two or three different thermometers through different points inside your calorimeter, those thermometers will start showing some variation in temperature. But eventually, all the thermometers at different points inside the calorimeter will all stabilize to one uniform temperature, and that temperature is steady with time and does not change anymore. So when that happens, we say that the mixture inside has reached thermodynamic equilibrium. So no more heat exchange is going to occur. Okay. So once thermodynamic equilibrium is established, there is no more heat exchange and no further heat exchange occurs. Okay. So the calculations we are going to do in typical questions involving calorimetric experiments are going to be application of this equation that we've written, that the heat supplied by the materials which are losing heat because they were at higher temperature initially, comparatively higher temperature. So they are going to come down to the lower equilibrium temperature. So those materials are going to supply heat, and the materials which were at comparatively lower temperature and their temperature is going to rise to whatever the steady state value is or the equilibrium temperatures, they are going to absorb that heat. So this heat supplied is going to be equal to the heat absorbed because remember they are in a container which is thermally insulated. So there is no heat exchange with the outside or with the surrounding. Okay, so let's look at an example question. So now what we're doing is, let's say 50 grams of ice at 0 degrees C is mixed with 200 grams of water at 30 degrees C in an insulated flask. So find the final temperature and composition of the mixture at equilibrium. Given that latent heat of fusion of ice is 80 calories per grams and specific heat capacity of water is 1 calorie per gram degree C. Okay. So this is comparatively a simple situation because you can see that there are only two materials which are mixed, and definitely you can see that ice is the one which will absorb heat and water initially at 30 degrees C is the material which will be supplying the heat. Okay. So to just set up an equation where to go from this initial state to whatever the final equilibrium state is, the heat supplied by the water should be equal exactly to the heat which is absorbed by the ice. Okay. So if we just set up this equation, we should be able to come up with the answer for the given question. Just try this out, people. Yeah, let's. Anybody got the answer for this? 4.86 degrees CF. Okay, let's check. Okay. So first of all, we have to understand here that uh, do we have enough heat available with us to melt all the ice? Because it might be that the heat that the water is capable of supplying is not enough to melt all the ice. So to understand that, okay, so the first thing we have to explore is that is the heat available from the water at 30 degrees C, is it enough to melt all the ice? So to answer that question, we can do this calculation. We can calculate Q1 as the heat needed to melt all the ice. To melt all the ice, how much heat do we require? So that is equal to mass of ice into latent heat of ice. So that is 50 grams of ice, which is initially at 0 degrees C only. So it's going to directly, sorry, 50 into 80 calories per gram degree C. So 50 grams and 80 calories per gram is required. So 4,000 calories of heat is needed. So that is my Q1. Okay. Now the next thing I need to see is this much heat available. So let's calculate Q2, which as the maximum heat that is available from water, which is 200 grams at initial temperature of 30 degrees. So maximum heat available कब होगा? If we assume maximum temperature drop. So that maximum possible temperature drop is going to be 30 degrees C. Okay, because we assume that the final temp is suppose 0 degrees C. In general, it can be anything greater than equal to 0 degrees C. So we assume that the ice is enough in mass to absorb all the heat from the water which is available to us. Okay, then how much heat is available to us? So let's calculate that. So Q2, this maximum heat is going to be mass of water into specific heat capacity of water into the maximum temperature drop. So that is 200 grams into 1 calorie per gram degree C into 30. So that is 6,000 calories. Okay. So we can see that because Q2 is greater than Q1, okay, Q2 is greater than Q1, so that implies that all the ice will melt. Okay. And along with that, the final temperature will in fact be greater than 0 degrees. So basically, we can see if Q2 had been exactly equal to Q1, then the final temperature would have been 0 degrees C, but all the ice would have melted. Okay. If Q2 had been less than Q1, then all the ice would not have melted. Okay. And the final temperature would have been 0 degrees C. Only part of the ice would have melted. Whereas if Q2 is greater than Q1, which is the case over here, then final temperature is greater than 0 degrees. Okay. So this is the case that is occurring. So these are the possible cases. Yeah, in second case, see what is happening now. Ki ice is absorbing heat, okay, to melt. But by the time your water comes down from 30 degrees C to 0 degrees C, all the ice is still not melted. So heat exchange तो खत्म हो गया ना उनके बीच. So there will be a mixture of water and ice that will exist. But at which temperature? The mixture can only exist at 0 degrees C, na Tej? So like that, okay. So for example, यहाँ पे suppose instead of starting with 200 grams of water, we had started with 100 grams of water. So then this would have been 3000 calories. Q2 would have been 3000 calories, whereas to melt all the ice, I need 4000 calories. So what will happen? I will not be able to melt all the ice. Only partial part of the ice will be melted. So let's say X grams of ice are melted. You know? So then X into latent heat should have become 3000 calories or Q2. Whereas the remaining would remain as ice and the final composition would be some amount of ice, okay, less than the initial value but not equal to 0. Okay. So some amount of ice and some amount of water are existing together at 0 degrees C. That would have been the situation. Okay, so anyhow, let's figure out the value now. So if this is happening, so let's say the final temperature is some X degrees C, okay, which we have to find out. So the heat absorbed is equal to the heat supplied. Okay. Now who is supplying the heat? Water. Okay. 200 grams of water cooling down from initial temperature of 30 degrees C to final temperature of X degrees C. Okay. Whereas who's absorbing the heat? Ice. So we have 50 grams of ice at 0 degrees C is melting first. Okay. And then the water created is heating from 0 to X degrees C. So that is the heat absorption that is happening. Okay. Exactly. Exactly. Okay. So you can write it that way also. Okay. So heat absorbed by the ice is mass of ice into latent heat of ice first for the melting plus that mass of ice only which is now formed water. Okay. Formed water at 0 degrees C. So specific heat capacity of water into this temperature difference. So this temperature difference. This should be equal to this thing. The mass of water initially at 30 degrees C into specific heat capacity of water into temperature change for the water which is cooling down. That is this temperature difference. So 50 into 80 which we've already seen before plus 50 into 1 into X. This temperature change will be from 0 to X. So that's that much. So that is equal to the mass of water we had at 30 degrees C into specific heat capacity of water which is 1 into this temperature drop will now be 30 minus X. Okay. So from this we have to just find the value of X. So 4000 plus 50X should be equal to 6000 minus 200X. So 250X should be equal to 2000. So X should be equal to according to me 8 degrees C. So the final equilibrium temperature will be 8 degrees C. Okay, so this kind of precise calculation is required in this chapter, nothing else. Just these couple of definitions of latent heat and specific heat capacity, but being able to do this type of calculation in all three cases. Suppose I had taken a different mass of water, a lesser mass of water compared to 200 grams, or the initial temperature of water had not been 30, it had been something lesser, then it could have been one of the other two cases also. Okay? So to be able to judge which case is happening and then accordingly set up the equation of calorimetry, that the heat supplied is equal to the heat absorbed. Below heat absorbed, yeah, I'll just show you in detail. So this is the heat absorbed by ice, which is 50 grams of ice at 0 degrees C is melting first, and then the water created is heating from 0 degrees C to X degrees C. Okay, so ये जो heat absorption हो रहा है, this is resulting in two processes. It's resulting in melting of the ice, and then that 50 grams of ice that is melted to form water at 0 degrees C, that water is, its temperature is rising from 0 to some unknown X. Understood now? So that's why the left hand side has two parts, two processes, melting, and then the melted water is temperatures rising from 0 to X. Whereas right hand side has a simple process. It's just water, 200 grams of water which was at 30 degrees C is coming down to some unknown temperature X. But there's no state change involved in that. So it's just coming down to that. So okay, so this is what calorimetry is about. Now, before we conclude today's lecture, when you're doing questions based on calorimetry, you can just do this from your module only. It's a very easy part. So you can just do the in-chapter exercise and then the questions from the exercise. Or you can also do from HC Verma. There's a separate chapter called calorimetry in HC Verma, but it's in HC Verma part 2. Okay. Now, sometimes you'll come across another term called water equivalent. Okay. Water equivalent. So, for example, it will be given like this, that a solid metallic block has a water equivalent of, let's say, 30 grams. So what this means? This means that the heat capacity of the given body, in this case, the solid metallic block, is equal to the heat capacity of this equivalent mass of water. So in this case, that is 30 grams water. So the heat capacity of the block will become equal to 30 grams into 1 calorie per gram degree C. So it will be 30 calories per degree C. Okay. So in simple terms, if this is X grams, then heat capacity will be X into specific heat capacity of water. So that is X in grams multiplied by 1 calorie per gram degree C. So it becomes the same value X, but in calories per degree C. Okay. So that is the meaning of the term water equivalent. Water equivalent is X number of grams. That means the given body has the same heat capacity as X grams of water. So another great result has come through today. Our student um, Ashish Prasad has got an overall percentile in JEE Mains March attempt of more than 99.7, and in physics he has scored 100 percentile. Yes, because the term is only water equivalent, no? So we treat water like the standard material. And just to give you a perspective, water has comparatively pretty high specific heat capacity. So water can be used as what we call a coolant. So in older generation internal combustion engines or cars and all that, the radiator was filled with water as the coolant. In current day technology, we have specific coolant liquids which have even higher specific heat capacity. But the larger the specific heat capacity of the liquid that we are using as the coolant, more efficiently it can absorb heat liberated by the engine. So coolant is a liquid that is used in a heat engine from the outside to keep the temperature under control. So when you run out of this thing, when you run out of coolant liquid, your engine can overheat. That can be one of the reasons for your engine to overheat. Yeah, Tej, to answer your question, the JEE Mains paper was pretty standard. I mean, last 3 years, if I talk about the general trend, uh, the average level of difficulty in physics is the same, but there is, the 5 or 10% questions which are on the more difficult level, their difficulty level is increased slightly in the last 3 years. That is the trend. JEE Mains went through a process where initially for some years, till about 3 years back, the level of difficulty in physics was decreasing. But now again, it's started increasing a bit. Whereas there was a time when maths was a little bit more challenging compared to physics and chemistry. But now I think it's more or less evened out between maths and physics at least. Okay, so anyway, that's it for today's session. We have another lecture coming up this week, so we will discuss some more questions of calorimetry, but mainly we will start with kinetic theory of gases and first law of thermodynamics along with that. So that is the portion where the maximum weightage is in this chapter, kinetic theory of gases and first law of thermodynamics applications. And you're familiar with a lot of that from chemistry, so you'll find that easy and it will be a bit of revision for you also. Okay. So that's it for today's session, people. Wishing you all the best.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, you can please send the recording a little quick.
Yeah, I'll send as soon as possible.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.